the way things are built over there, that some of them, with the driveways going downward instead of, just towards the house and things like that, it's a real problem. But I think there's a real situation here that the city needs to do something about.
All right.
And I know that's a problem, but this is just my opinion.
Sure. And actually, I think we all agree with that. The question before us today is whether or not we're going to approve this subdivision. And unfortunately, I don't think, you guys can vote how you vote, but I don't think we can use stormwater as a reason to not approve a subdivision that meets the zoning code. I do think there's a lot of feedback here, which is important. And I think that there's all kinds of things that we could do. We could change the zoning rules that require certain shapes of lots. That would be very difficult to do, but that could be something we could try to do. We could look at stormwater improvements in the CIP. We know the budget's always tight, but that's something we could do next year. So I think this feedback here is very helpful, but not necessarily super relevant to the actual question of subdivision, which is, as we started out, Mr. Dodd said from the beginning, is a pretty particular, specific, technical thing, which we don't actually have a ton of leeway on. People have property rights, and I think they bank on those. So I don't disagree with any of your points about the stormwater. I do think we should do something about it. I think that the realistic things we can do are not related to this subdivision. But
Should we get more information?
Well, I think that the issue here is, like, with commercial properties, we have real
Things to
regulations. So
say.
just, people were saying that we keep approving all these developments, but just so you know, the mixed-use developments, they have to deal with all their water. Our water
Absolutely.
issue is mostly residential issues, because we don't have a lot of tough regulations there. And we've had the same problem on my street, and we were told that once the house was built, it was a civil matter. It was no longer, even though that house was putting off more water than they were supposed to. And the city doesn't consider that to be a city matter. They consider it to be a civil matter, even though that house should have controlled all their water. So I guess the question is it's an investment, like, it's something that has to be investigated, because we have to determine what the state will allow us to do. So a lot of our issues is we're a Dillon rule state, therefore we can only do what the state allows us to do. So maybe they'll allow us to do more with residential infill runoff. We have,
We've got a problem there.
I don't know what Arlington does. Does Arlington have stricter rules?
Well, the Chesapeake Bay ordinance is adopted throughout the
Right.
Commonwealth, so there are rules. Let's be clear. New house construction is responsible for mitigating
Right.
the 2 and 10 year storm. Problem is, what you're referring to that happened back in September was probably well in excess of the 2 or 10 year storm. It could have been you hear the term 100-year storm, 500-year storm.
Okay.
It doesn't mean it happens once every 100 years. Unfortunately, with the way weather and
Getting a
climate
lot more.
is moving, we're seeing more significant extreme rain events more often. And sometimes it's going to exceed any engineered method to retain and mitigate stormwater. What you will see is in sort of what I'll say average rain events. Like, for example, the older house on this property has no stormwater at all.
Right.
Wasn't required to, doesn't have it. The new house will have to have some stormwater mitigation in the form of some detention, whether it's a subsurface kind of tank, rain garden, pervious driveway. There are different techniques that engineers are allowed to use to meet the Chesapeake Bay. So just to be clear, residential construction is subject to the Chesapeake Bay ordinance here in the city.
Right.
But,
No, I
but
understand.
only to a point. And so the problem is
Right.
when we have these very frequent severe storms, it really drives home and exacerbates where the problem points are in the city. We have very old infrastructure, has been pointed out. There's some parts of the city that have, bottlenecks and old pipes and clogs and other issues that when we get an extreme event in the summer, like a summer downpour or hurricane or something very extreme, it's really going to drive home the point where the problems are. But right, we can only regulate to a certain engineering standard, and that's going to.
I think certainly there's a request could be made to council that we put together some kind of task force and really look at this and find out what we really can do. And is there more we could be doing with Chesapeake Bay than we're doing right now? Because I know that the Seabrook meetings happen, but I don't know how strong.
Right.
But nothing, I've been to many where it doesn't seem like much changes, so, we just need to look at it to see if there's more to do.
I would love to get.
I know we
to
can go
vote.
off of it.
So
Yeah.
the only thing I've heard of that might make me want to delay this is if there was a problem with the notification, which there are a couple people commented that maybe they didn't hear or you didn't hear recently. It sounded to me like you followed the rules. So unless there's a reason to believe that the notification wasn't proper, if you guys want to delay to ask some questions, I guess we could do that, but I would wonder what questions we have, so I would
I
be
would like
ready.
to delay until we could get a plat that actually shows what the width of the front building setback is. Because as it is right now, it's not on any of the plats they've given us. So we have nothing, no measurements to show what it is.
Okay,
I mean, that's.
I'm personally comfortable that the zoning administrator did his job properly, but if we're worried about that, if you're worried about that, you guys
Yes.
could make a motion.
I'm-
to-
Well, I mean, just, I'm personally concerned. I think we should have received those measurements. That's part, a big part of what,
Mr. Stoddard, are
makes
those
this-
measurements normally on things like that? Is it
This
unusual?
is such an
They have been
unusual
before.
situation,
Looking
and
to see if it's a required element for plats.
but generally, most plats that I've received that are subdivisions have those measurements. In fact, I've seen them where it has measurements all along the different sections of
Okay,
it, so.
that's fine. What we're wondering is if it's required. We're trying to
Okay.
figure out if we can vote on this, and if you guys don't want to vote on it, that's fine, but I'd like to move on to the
I mean, it's
next
probably not a
item.
plat requirement. It may have been helpful to, you know, if we'd had something, you know, provided that showed
Okay.
that, but.
Yeah, so if you guys want to
Probably not a
delay
plat
to get that
requirement.
measurement, to find out if it's 75 feet, then someone could make that motion. Otherwise,
Okay.
I'd love to.
I move that we delay this motion until we receive a plat that has the actual measurements of the building envelope, especially at the front setback.
I'll second it.
How long are we delaying it for? Just until we, or deferring, I guess. It'd be deferring.
I guess until they can provide that information till the next meeting or whatever, where the calendar will fit it.
I am hesitant to delay it just because the final application materials were received on May 16, and the applicant does have a right to be heard within 60 days of application.
Well, technically they're being heard, but, well, I don't know. I'll see what I don't know what the will of the commission is. I mean, if we're gonna defer it, I mean, there were other questions that we could look at. I don't know. I'm probably
I,
comfortable, you know.
I'm
putting conditions
personally
on it,
not
but-
planning to defer it. I mean, to me, if it's not 75 feet, they'll never build a house over there. So I'm not too worried about it coming up short. So it seems to me like it's a technicality that I'm not personally worried about, but obviously we could take a vote. So do we need to make a motion to a specific date, or does anyone?
I would think it would be at the next planning commission meeting, which looks like it's June 17. The other thing that I'm looking at is that if the planning commission is going to deny a subdivision, it has to in writing provide the reasons for that. And so I think if there is additional information that the planning commission feels it needs, then I think it would be important to specify all of that information so that the applicant has a chance to respond.
It sounds like you're requesting one thing,
And one thing,
which is specifically?
it is the measurement of the front setback of the building
Someone had a
envelope.
scale. Someone had a scale, and I'm a trusty scale.
Yeah.
Someone measured. You don't have the,
I mean, I
Where's your
looked at all the
scale, Paul?
materials I received and none of that was available.
you're an engineer in the room with a scale.
It has been at plats we've received before.
Okay,
It's an
so,
engineer back there. We have a scale in the back.
just so I'm
Do we have,
clear,
do we have a hard, do we have it printed out? Do we have the plat to scale? I see a scale in the.
Yeah, we could actually use that.
We can probably get that answer. I mean, I mean, if it's that simple, I think we have
when Mr. Krasner
several
says
engineers back
scale,
there, scales.
for lay people, that is a ruler.
Yes.
It's a fancy ruler.
It's a special ruler.
it's a
It has to be
triangular
size.
ruler.
You know, I'm having a real problem with this. If this comes before the planning commission, and we've got a question and concerns about it, that should be enough for getting some more information.
Yeah,
Otherwise, it should be
Okay.
an administrative thing
Right.
that doesn't even come
Okay,
before
right,
us.
so to be clear, we can make a motion to ask for very specific information and we can vote on it. I'm
I
not
feel
trying
like-
to deny that at all.
There actually has been a motion and seconded.
Yes,
Okay.
we
I'm
did.
happy
So
to.
I'm ready to take a vote, but it sounds
on-
like maybe some people are gonna wait 30 seconds for Mr. Holleran to get out his scale.
We are applying
I'm
the
not
scale
usually
in real
ornery, but
time.
I am tonight.
I do think that's something we should have. on
I think,
plats.
I think that, yeah, I think this is a challenging one. Like most subdivisions, we're not very excited about them, and we are.
Well, some of them are fine.
85, are you guys
Okay.
satisfied with the scaling, or would you like that to be done more efficiently?
Well, I think,
Should
I
we
think
vote
we
on that
would,
motion?
I think we would prefer it to be done more
Okay, so
efficiently,
you wanna-
but if he's used the scale and you know how to use it, then I guess
All
we'll
right,
take it.
we have a motion and a second. I want to vote on
You
that
have a
unless,
right to
unless
use
you want to
that ruler.
retract it.
No, no,
Do you?
we can retract the motion because
Okay.
of that, because I only asked for one
Do we
piece
have
of
any other
information.
motions? We got to get on to the next item. This is
Uh,
kind of ridiculous.
It is. It's just uncomfortable.
Can I make a motion?
Because you're not chairing the meeting, that would be.
I wasn't here in the beginning. I'll let someone else make the motion.
Anybody up for making a motion? Mr. Stevens?
No one wants to make this motion.
I'd make it. I don't think I'm allowed to.
You are not.
It would be unusual.
You're not.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
whereas the proposed subdivision meets all applicable requirements in the city subdivision and zoning ordinances, and whereas a recommendation from the Historical Commission on a naming of the subdivision has been provided, I move that the Planning Commission grant preliminary and final plat approval of the subdivision of 503 East Columbia Street, RPC number 53-101-007, into two proposed with the following condition: that the proposed property addresses be adjusted on the plats to indicate that the existing parcel will remain 503 East Columbia Street, and the future parcel will become 501 East Columbia Street. I further move that the Planning Commission grant staff authority to administratively approve and label the plat with the Historical Commission's recommended name.
Which I think is Herring Terrace. All right. Do we have a second?
I will second for discussion purposes, but I also wanted, I think maybe there are a few other conditions we should put on, just based on the, the comments we received tonight. And I think we can put some, and these conditions aren't gonna be draconian, these are just, I think, recommendations for staff in processing the future application. But I would suggest that we put a condition, one related to that driveway, based on the comment we heard tonight from city staff regarding that any curb cut for lot 501 meet adequate site distance. And so, I think that's kind of self-evident, but that seems to be a concern, so I'm gonna suggest we put a condition that, if any new curb cut, needs to meet site distance, adequate site distance. We could also put something in there, a condition related to, again, making sure that any future construction, again, meet the requirements of the city stormwater ordinance, which is, again, self-evident, but I think we can reinforce the point that, that needs to occur. So I would second it, but I'm also suggesting to the maker of the motion those two.
Mr.
additional-
Stevens, what do you feel about
Conditions.
these friendly amendments?
I'm willing to accept those friendly amendments.
All righty. Who's going to do the roll call vote? Or any other comments real quick?
Yeah, let me just make a real quick comment. I apologize to everyone for coming in late. I had read the materials prior to coming here. I've been on the Planning Commission for almost 12 years. I have not received a subdivision application where I was either pleased with it or the neighbors were. This meeting is very, unfortunately, standard. Those people in the neighborhood are unhappy to see their property or their neighborhood disturbed in ways. Each time this comes before the Planning Commission, whatever the makeup has been, we have begrudgingly, honestly, approved them. I came here tonight thinking this was a pretty perfunctory vote because it meets the code requirements, because the property rights of the owner. I think the amendments that Mr. Krasner has added will be helpful. I want to sort of mirror what Mr. Rankin said about this being a good forum. You actually have some audience here in the back that is hearing what you're saying, and this hopefully can have some impact on our stormwater in general. I know it's a topic of discussion for the city all the time. It comes before us on budget discussions. But based on what I have read in the documents, it's not, the issues that I'm hearing about the stormwater are not grounds for the Planning Commission to deny the application. So I'm going to vote to support it, but I caught the tail end, and I can certainly feel the tenor of the room here, that this makes the neighborhood unhappy and that there's a real stormwater problem in that area. And so I hear those, and they're helpful in terms of pushing that item as we move forward on budget discussions, which the Planning Commission does have a role in terms of the CIP. So I do thank you for your feedback. I suspect the outcome will not be what you hope for, but in terms of the way we are the rules about which govern us and our ability to move on these subdivision applications, they're unfortunately very limited. So, again, I apologize for being late and not part of the earlier discussion, but I understand your frustration. So.
Any other comments? Please say no. All right. Now we'll go with the vote, please.
Mr. Krasner,
Yes.
Mr. Stevens,
Yes.
Ms. Hockenberry,
No,
Ms. Teets,
No.
Mr. Rankin,
Yes.
Mr. Wodisca.
Yes.
All right, thank you. And with that, I'm going to officially
Are you done?
hand item number 7 over to our chair, Mr. Wodisca. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. All right. All right, well, let's keep this moving. Most of this meeting is about work session, but before we move to that, let's get through the planning commissioner reports. Item 7A. Any reports from our usual suspects?
I ate lunch at the new park. It was nice.
Was it? All right, seeing no planning commissioner reports. The planning director report. That's the first time, by the way, I think we've gotten no planning commissioner reports, ever. That's fine.
Thank you, Chair. Relatively short planning director's report in your package this meeting. First item is the next community meeting for the Founders Row project, which is currently scheduled for Wednesday, June 12th. There is a date overlap with a community meeting for West Falls Church. And those are both scheduled for the same night, and so I think we are looking at whether that Founders Row meeting could be scheduled. Of course, that's not a public, it is open to the public, but it's not a publicly organized meeting. It is being organized by the Founders Row development team. Also included as an attachment in the package was the schedule of the remaining community meetings. Second item, as written up, there is a flyer attached in your packets that is for a community meeting for the comprehensive plan updates, for the proposed comprehensive plan updates for the demographics chapter and the housing chapter. That meeting is occurring this Saturday, June 8th, at Columbia Baptist Church. I believe we're beginning in the morning, I think at 9 o'clock. And then the third item, not included in your packets, on a personnel front, I will be starting a parental leave next week, and I expect to be out through the end of July. In my absence, Shana Schaefer, who you've had the opportunity to work with several times over the last several months, as well as Gary Fuller, will be sharing responsibilities for staffing the Planning Commission.
Is this for your existing child?
It is not.
well, I was gonna ask that.
Congratulations.
I think it
Congratulations.
was very apparent in the new one. Less sleep again.
It will mean less sleep.
I don't know, we
Yes.
keep these meetings going pretty late. Might be a tie.
I'm looking forward to it.
You know, actually, that's what you do. You sit in your car and take a nap here and pretend the meeting went late. I have done that. I have stayed
Well-
later, so I don't have to put my kids to bed.
Gordon.
And one item that was included in the correspondence items late today, that was an invitation by the school superintendent to the groundbreaking for the George Mason Middle
Empty
School.
space.
It's better on email.
There's a picture missing.
That's for security reasons. Images are not automatically downloaded in our email.
Doesn't change the information.
Could I just put a quick addendum onto that meeting on the 8th? We also had the music festival.
Oh, yeah.
Tinner Hill.
Tinner Hill Music
Yeah.
Festival this
So,
weekend.
you know,
Everyone go.
More than just blues now. More than just blues now. It's just
Oh, it's wet.
what they said.
New Orleans stuff. Funk.
Is there any other correspondence? I don't think so. That's up on here. I have a lot of paper. No other correspondence?
There is a correspondence item from the Tree Commission, but it's related to a later item on the agenda.
Perfect, okay, all right. So let's now move on to the work session items. The first one is item 8A, Falls Church City School Board Properties re-subdivision.
Confusing thing again?
So we've, for items A and B, for those on the commission, we have already dealt with this in the past, and we are now revisiting it, but I assume we are going to get a staff report explaining the changes from the last time we voted on it.
Correct. Commissioners, before you as a work session item tonight is a newly proposed subdivision for the approximately 34 acres at the, what is currently the site of the high school and middle school, and is proposed for also private development on approximately 9 to 10 acres of the site. As the chair said, this was previously before the Planning Commission. A revised plat is being brought to you for discussion tonight. And I'll actually turn it over to the city's consultant engineer for a little bit of the background on the redrawing of the lines. But in summary, as described in the staff report, the redrawing of the lines is intended to accommodate comments that have been received from the applicant, Fairfax County, the schools, the city's general staff, and how the 70-30 agreement is written, how the parking for the high school would work, as well as the layout of the private economic development.
All right.
And this is basically because last time when we did, it was very confusing. There was a section that was sort of questionable how it was gonna go, and it
Yeah, they
went
changed
the other
line.
way, so.
Yeah.
This confused us mightily last time.
We powered through it, though.
Straighten
We,
out that line.
we figured it out.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G,
Let's go back to the attachments.
We have all Walter
Can you make
Phelps
this
here
creepy,
tonight.
by the way, the camera right now is staring at you.
No, everything changed.
Let's go to attachment 2. Yeah, there we go. Let's stay here. If you can make this full screen.
What attachment are we looking at?
This is attachment 2. So this is substantially similar to what was before the Planning Commission when they last heard and took action on this item. As before, there are a number of parcels to the left that are being, and they're actually the subject of the next work session item, which is consolidating land to the west for the new high school, middle school joint campus. Parcel D would be the land set aside for the development of the 9 to 10 acres of private development. The lot is a slightly different shape. The other thing that's changed since the last time is that there is no more trapezoidal parcel at the bottom of the picture. Now that's been replaced with this line coming down and then jogging over to the left. This has been discussed, and it is, the developer has stated that this would be sufficient for the redesigned conceptual plan, which they've provided. That's also a hard copy material that's provided at the dais tonight, and that's for work session item C. Of course, all the items are related to one another, the subdivision, the transference, and the redevelopment, but for purposes of the agenda, they're labeled individually. So this is the action that's before the Planning Commission tonight. I'm sorry, the work session item is before the Planning Commission, with the anticipation of a final action by the Planning Commission at its next meeting.
All right, yeah, since we're dealing with these individually, let's go one at a time. But, so this is, we've already voted on this in other form. I think it was explained, the rationale for it. I did have one small question. At the last time we looked at this, we understood it was because of the mathematics associated with meeting the requirements of the arrangement with Fairfax County. And as a result, we had drawn these unusual parcel lines that extended into Haycock Road. And I believe Mr. Krasner had asked about that. That seemed to be more unusual than not. It had happened, you know, much more frequent, what you just said, 30, 40 years ago. With the adjustment, now that that parcel D is smaller, does it still make sense to be extending all the way, well, I guess to the halfway point of Haycock Road? It seemed, it was unusual then, we understood why. I just want to know if the math changes now that we've reduced the size of this lot. Exactly.
Just so I understand, is the question, does it still make sense to extend the parcel line, or is the question, could the parcel line be redrawn at the curb line and still meet the letter of the agreement?
It's the latter, correct?
So at the time of the ALTA and during the RFP process, there was an exhibit prepared that showed that the street reservations were excluded from that 10-acre commercial development parcel. And so the subdivision was drawn in keeping with the way that exhibit was originally presented.
So you're saying that the reservation areas were not included? I'm sorry, I just didn't follow the.
Correct, yes. So there was 10 acres carved out for the commercial
Right.
development, and the street reservations were excluded from that 10 acres.
Do you mean not shown or not included in?
Not included in the calculation of the 10 acres.
So why don't we clean up the lot lines? I guess, I don't know, it just seems strange that we would leave it like that.
If we're moving lot lines anyway.
Why not clean that up
I
and,
don't,
Yeah.
if you,
The city manager's here, and obviously he's been a party to a lot of these conversations and might have more of the details.
comes out of the shadows. It's been your whole, I didn't see him raise his hand. Subdivision conversation.
You didn't want to talk about runoff earlier?
I was very busily doing work in the back of the room. Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission, I think just one thought on what has guided our thinking on this subdivision is to take the minimal action. And the minimal action is to create a parcel that would then be conveyed to the city and then conveyed to the EDA and ultimately subject to a ground lease with the development team. So what is before you is sort of the minimal action. The other things that we could do and we probably would do were it not for the 2013 boundary agreement is we would vacate that area and just turn that into public right-of-way like every other street in the city. And we may in the future, in coordination with Fairfax County, just to be very clear with what we're doing, we might do that. But right now, we want to have fealty to that 2013 agreement, which identifies the school-related parcels. That's a defined term in that agreement, and this shows exactly what those are, and we're not changing that.
okay.
Yeah, all right, that makes sense to me, honestly. Okay, so I don't have any other, if people have comments, go ahead. I don't have, other than that we've redrawn the lines because of a new, essentially an application by, or the SEE is redefined because of the parking garage issue. I don't have any other questions. This was clear last time after an hour of conversation, so I'm good. Anybody have any other comments? All right, then I'm entertaining a motion to,
I think that we vote next time, right?
Okay, just work.
oh, right, I'm sorry, this is, you are totally correct. I feel like this is just done at this point. Thank you, Mr. Shields.
How many times can we do it?
Exactly. All right, well, let's work on the land transfers then.
Similar.
Sure, so this item is also before you for work session with the intent of recommendation from the planning, in this case, the planning commission's role is to make a recommendation to council. Like the subdivision, this has minimal adjustments from the time the planning commission last saw this. The language of the motion and the language of the staff report has been updated to reflect the proposed changes in the subdivision line.
And Ms. Hogmer asked, we can't vote on it now just because we need the advertised
Yeah, absolutely.
change in the thing.
Correct, there are advertising requirements, public hearing requirements.
Yeah, I don't think this will be more than a few minutes at the next meeting. Any questions as to the land transfers? Okay. Let's move on then. Let's get to why we're here, honestly.
I just want to witness a dollar transfer.
The dollar
Or
transfer?
$10, or what is it, $10?
$100 million.
Is it gonna be in quarters, or?
The last item before you for work session tonight is a discussion of the amended application for the West Falls Church Special Exception Entitlement. The applicant is here to make a presentation, but first I want to turn it over for a brief presentation on the staff report from the case planner, Keita Ruzzi.
No, you can go ahead. Good evening, Akita Rizzi with Planning. Tonight, the Planning Commission has requested to hear a presentation from the applicant on the revised concept plans for the West Falls Church Economic Development Special Exception Entitlement. Before I turn it over to the applicant, I'd like to briefly highlight the staff report that's before you tonight. On February 25th, City Council referred the project to city boards and commissions. Applicant's response matrix to those comments received from boards and commissions is provided in attachment 4 of your report. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on April 1st and recommended approval. At the scheduled public hearing on May 13th, 2019, City Council deferred the application to July 8th to give staff and applicant additional time to address comments received from staff, city boards and commissions, school board, and Fairfax County. The council also referred the pending revised proposal to EDA and school board for comments and to the Planning Commission for a recommendation. The Planning Commission public hearing on the revised concept is scheduled for June 17th. There's also a community meeting scheduled for June 12th for the public and members of boards and commissions. And an updated schedule for the project is provided at the end of your staff report, which has all the new dates for the project. The applicant is currently working on the revised development plan and preparing to submit this week. At this time, what has been provided to staff is concept sketches of the revised development proposal for feedback by the Planning Commission in advance of the scheduled public hearing. Staff will review their revised submission and provide comments as part of the June 17th Planning Commission staff report. Based on the concept sketches, the key changes of the revised development include the following elements. The shared parking garage is removed. The proposed street grid has been adjusted. The left turn out of Commons Drive onto Leesburg Pike that was presented as an option in submission 2 is not shown as part of the revised development plan. Street A connection to Mustang Alley and school pickup drop-off loop is no longer shown, but discussions are ongoing on the potential for the new school pickup and drop-off loop. Potential new street connection to Mustang Alley to the north was created. While the programming and square footages of uses remain as proposed, the overall massing and footprint of the buildings have been adjusted. Block A is split into 2 smaller blocks, and a street is created connecting Street A and Leesburg Pike. The grocery store in Block A is relocated to the corner of Haycock Road and Leesburg Pike, offering commercial presence and activity at the corner and along Haycock. The senior housing building is now proposed to be located in Block D, therefore moving the tallest proposed building away from the schools. The hotel would be moved to the north half of the Block B, and the micro-unit apartment building would be located on Block C. The revised plans would provide an alternate layout that these 2 uses can switch locations in the future. In either case, the height proposed earlier and the massing is to shift away from the school plaza in the revised proposal. A parking garage is included in Block D, and the previously proposed alleyway connecting Mustang Alley and Street A is removed. Phase 2 office is relocated to the Leesburg Pike adjacent to school surface parking, and Phase 2 retail is now proposed at the northern corner of Haycock and Street A. In terms of application and approval process, on May 13th, the council approved the terms for and authorized the city manager to execute the comprehensive agreement. In general, the comprehensive agreement sets out the business terms of the development agreement, such as the schedule of land payments to the city, to construction covenants, the schedule of performance, and the like. The special exception entitlement sets out the land entitlements for the developer and will govern the conceptual development program, including building heights, locations, and uses, and will be refined as part of the special exception site plan to be submitted and approved in the future. So essentially, the development proposal at the current SEE stage is conceptual in nature, and the site plan will provide more details for city review and approvals. This special exception site plan process, similar to the SEE process, will consist of 1, referral of the application by City Council to boards and commissions, 2, staff review and review by the Planning Commission and any other boards and commissions to whom the City Council refers the application, and finally, approval by Council. In terms of the VCs, a first draft was submitted on March 16th. Applicant submitted a revised draft, which is provided in attachment 3 on May 3rd. Staff is currently working with the applicant for further refinement of the VCs that would reflect a revised development proposal. An updated draft will be available for the June 17th Planning Commission public hearing. The Planning Commission recommendation So on April 1st, the Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend approval of the development proposal and asked that several items be incorporated into the SEE materials, as well as the special exception site plan. How these items are addressed in the revised concept is discussed in detail on page 5 of the report, so I won't go too much into that because all of the items were actually covered in the key changes found in the revised concept. That concludes my staff report. I'll take any questions, otherwise I can turn it over to the applicant for the revised proposal.
Any questions? No? All right, I'm anxious to see the presentation.
Oh, there we go.
We should put formal. No, it's
Right?
hard to get to use and just see which ones are going to. There you go.
To me, the big change is losing the
Easier.
asking about that.
But you're right, you have to remember it's closed.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I,
Impose their will here.
they did, and the question is now, how is this going, how well is it going to work?
That's pretty basic. I think it'll
Is that okay?
people
Yeah.
in professional city are gonna.
I know, but everyone's going to have to go out this way now. Make a lip.
I can,
You can, yeah, or down Grove or something, I mean.
Tell us up with the.
Or Highland.
Gen Xers.
Here, but there's one over here.
Yeah.
Still learning.
So both of the offices
Yeah,
are
well,
now.
yeah, right, I
Oh,
was
no,
gonna talk about doing that,
phase
going
two.
behind the giant,
So
yeah.
phase 2 thing was
Yeah.
changed.
Yeah, so they're gonna have an empty lot there, and they're
Oh.
gonna split the empty lot.
Well, that was, what you guys were just talking about was a little off, so I'll correct that as I go through the plan. So first of all, thank you all for having us speak today and present the revised SE application. This application was revised for a number of reasons, but first and foremost, after having a ton of community outreach, hearing from community members, hearing from council members, hearing from the county, there was a decision to go forward with a plan that had a little bit less risk involved as far as the size of the parcel, and make sure that it was 100% beyond question, that it's in accordance with the agreement that you all have with the county. And so the main difference here is that the parcel boundary is reduced from 10.4 acres to 9.4 acres. And so the change in the size of the parcel obviously precipitated some changes to the land use in order to still make the program fit. And so we spent about 2 to 3 weeks of intense study to figure out how we could deliver all of the material terms that we had committed to, all of the land use that we had committed to, and actually, in this case, we believe improve the plan even beyond where it was before and address a bunch of the questions and comments that had come up during the SE review process. So I'll walk you through those as we go through the plan tonight. I'll hit on a few of the key slides. This is our entire SE application that will be submitted on Friday. Officially, it's going to be bound and printed this week because we have to submit 46 copies, which from a green perspective, that might be something you guys want to tackle in the future. But anyway, that will be submitted on Friday. But at this point, the application work is completed, and the PDF of the application is what you're seeing. Slides-wise, I'll skip some of these slides and go to the overall plan. As you can see, the plan itself has not changed all that much, except for what I was just hearing you guys talk about, which is the corner over here. The Commons is retained. It's almost identical to what we had shown last time, other than the fact that it's shifted about 15 feet closer to Haycock. But the size of it is the same. But you'll notice a few cool things. There's the introduction of a new street coming in off Route 7, which we'll talk about in detail when we get to the retail plan. There's a building cut through that takes you from the Commons across into this Winnerf space, which is this kind of shared cool space. We've now shifted the grocery towards Haycock itself in response to a bunch of questions about having retail and the feeling of streetscape, retail orientation along both Haycock and 7. You can see the latest design for the hotel. I'm sorry, there's actually a residential rental building and the hotel is here. But you can see that we've been able to shift that building tower away from the school plaza and open up some space at the lower levels so that the shadows are not impacting the school plaza in the way they were before. The Phase 1 office building remains in Phase 1. In fact, I think the next sheet shows, oh, we don't have a phasing diagram in here. Sorry about that. Oh, there it is. There it is. So the two Phase 2 parcels, in the prior plan, the two Phase 2 parcels had been up here, the office and the residential parcel. In the revised plan, the residential Phase 2 parcel remains up here in the corner, but the Phase 2 office parcel is now much better. It's on Route 7 with visibility from 7, which is where you really want it to be. It's directly next to our Phase 1 office building, so to the extent we have a tenant that wants to expand next door, they'll have more flexibility and the ability to do that. And so we're actually very excited about that change to the plan. We think it's much better. What we have done is where we used to have an above-grade structured parking deck here that we were sharing with the schools, we've obviously lost that, and so that's now surface parking for the schools. And we were able to create an above-grade structured parking deck up here. We originally had that on Block A, which was why Block A was such a massive block before. Now it's up on Block D, and it serves the residential building by this bridge that will create this kind of gateway as you enter the project coming up Street A. Let's see, the plan really comes to life when you see it at the ground level. And so all the red is retail, as it always has been. You can see we have retail at almost all the ground levels of the buildings. We have the grocery store now shifted. It used to be this entire length from Commons Drive to Haycock, and now it's pushed here to the Haycock 7 corner. We are showing an entrance here at the main intersection as well as an entrance here at the Wunnerf space. The ability to have outdoor cafe dining for the grocery store along that Wunnerf. And then we've created this pedestrian cut through that goes through and under the condominium building so that for office workers that are working here or people that are in the commons, they have this great, kind of fun pedestrian passageway that takes them right to the grocery store second entrance and the cafe zone and kind of creates a lively experience in this Wunnerf. And one of the things I would say, if any of you have been to the Wharf or, Bethesda Lane in Bethesda, the old plan, while it was a great plan, it had everything focused on the commons, and we didn't have other spaces to celebrate and create kind of these cool moments for the project. And what this does is it creates this space right here at the entrance to the Wunnerf, this kind of pedestrian-oriented shared street going all the way up and through, so that now this experience feels much better than it ever did, because quite frankly, this didn't even exist before. And we've created a nice flat Street A experience here, with a little bit of a setback in the building here. And so we've kind of created a few additional moments for the project that didn't exist in the original plan. As I said, the Commons has remained the way it has before. We have retail at this corner across from the grocery store entrance, so this becomes an active and lively street. We have the condominium entrance right here along that space as well, and also along the shared corridor. We have residential amenity space along Street A here, and the lobby and entrance to that building right at the corner here. So all of the corners now of the project are active and lively and interesting, and we're really excited, quite frankly, about the revised plan. Up above, these are the uses above. And so the big change that we think the school board will be excited about when we meet with them next week is, given the change to all the uses, we were able to move what was the micro building from here to here, shift the hotel from here to here, and as a result, put the senior housing building up here. And that's the tallest building in the plan. And by, number one, pushing it away from the schools, that helps with shadows. It helps with, quite frankly, their number one complaint about the project, which was height up against the schools. And then secondly, it takes what would have been shadows on our commons and pushes them up to the northern, eastern side of the street, so that the commons will be as light as possible evenings and afternoons, until dusk, until the sun goes down.
So the commons are kind of connected right up there with the.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this.
With the senior.
Yeah, this remains the way it was in our old plan. We always had that kind of angled cut-through street there on Street A, and that remains. The one thing that we're not 100% sure about yet, we're encouraging the school board to retain the drop-off turnaround that we had agreed to build here at the northern part of their parking lot, so that parents can still come in, circulate through and out, and that this would connect all the way through to Mustang Alley. They're studying that to see if they have enough parking spaces to allow that to happen, because they would have to lose some spaces to make that happen. But we think, even if you're losing 20 spaces, it's so much of a better experience for, and safer experience for kids to be dropped off right on the plaza. So that's our personal view, but we're working with them on that, and we're open to it going either way. However way it works, either Street A will drop into their parking lot, in which case parents will drive through and back out, or it will have this turnaround, but either one works.
Lindy, I don't know that you got the answer you thought. Just so you're clear, this doesn't connect to this. This is on the second floor.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Got it. Thank you. I didn't realize what you were asking. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a second floor private space for the senior housing residents.
Okay.
They typically do memory care and things like that on the
And
second
while
level.
we're at that, is that a bridge, that little?
Yep.
Yeah, she was into the parking garage.
Got it.
Yeah, so that's a bridge connection from the residential apartment building to the garage. And what we're viewing that as is, we think a lot of the cars will come to the site coming up Street A. And so it creates this kind of cool bridge experience where you've changed over from the street to a more one-earth space, a shared space. And since all the pedestrians will be coming out of the garage right here, this space will be really active and lively. And showing it on the retail plan, you can see that's retail along this whole edge here. And so this becomes a really active space, and that bridge kind of creates the connection, or when you've officially entered the project from that side, and then we'll have a gateway, of course, down here as well. So that's also responding to comments.
So I could say, based on this, I think only that residential, are any of these terraces at ground
No, the
level,
only, right, the
Because
commons.
there used to be one that was, but I think in the senior building, it seemed like that one was
No, that was up
ground level.
above as
Was
well.
it? Okay.
Yeah, and the reason for that is pretty simple. We're maximizing retail as much as possible on the
Right.
ground floor, because that's the goal, to make it active and lively. And so all of those courtyard spaces are up above the retail.
Yeah, because I know that Parks and Rec is very concerned that you have not enough green space.
Yeah, I know, we've heard
And
that.
active spaces, and if there's children, there's nowhere for children to play.
Right, so we've
And-
heard
and
that.
the- And the high school site is not going to be available for that.
Yes, we've heard that issue. Both of us have a ton of experience designing, both of us have a ton of experience designing residential buildings that have amenity spaces within the buildings, that have rooftop amenity spaces, and we have a huge 1 acre to 2 acre commons, especially when cars are close, it goes almost 2 acres. That is the big public benefit, is the provision of enough density to fund the school, as well as this awesome grand gesture commons park. And you're right, we can't also, in addition to that, provide additional recreation space on site, because we just don't have the
Well, I think they were
ability to do
saying
that.
that even a simple playground isn't available, it looks like, so.
Well, we haven't gotten far enough along in design to know what play elements will be incorporated
Okay.
into the project. Yeah, I mean, that's all part of SESP.
Okay.
The square footages, all the stuff that you had seen before, the unit counts, none of that has changed. So what you approved last time, all the main square footages and requirements of the project are the same. These are the alternate plans, and so we haven't 100% finished studying whether the hotel can work on this center block versus the rental building on the northern block, or the residential building on the northern block, so those could swap, but the plan would not be changed. The heights of the buildings are similar, so it shouldn't have a big impact. And then similarly, while we are leaning 95% towards the idea we've shared, which is moving the senior housing to this block over here, we've still kept in that as an alternative plan, only if, for some reason, we get forced to swap the office and the residential building. You can see it here. If the Phase 2 office building has to go up to Haycock and Mustang Alley, then that requires that we shift this garage over a little bit, which makes this parcel too small for senior housing. We don't expect that to happen. That would be purely if something with the plat or the approval tells us that it has to be a perfect square and it can't have this bump out here. That would be the backup plan. We've only shared that in this tiny little diagram because we don't expect that to be something the city would force us to do. And we don't want to do it, so it would come from the city telling us to do it. But that would be the backup.
So for phase 2, then you've got, you've got 2 staging areas then for phase 1.
Yeah,
And-
so, right, that's right.
And is the staging area that's down near the parking lot, is that gonna be a problem with the parking lots?
No, the way what we've worked with the schools on is basically this property gets split in half, and half of it is parking, half of it is staging for phase 1. So that seems to work for us. And then the other parcel can be staging as well.
Yeah.
The 3D drawings of the project, similar to what you had seen before, the big difference being that the senior housing is now up here instead of over here, so it's a little bit further away. The office building is similar height to where what the senior housing was, but this building is now pushed further from the school because the school angles away. So that's a benefit there.
And the height on that office building is sort of.
To be
TBD,
determined at phase 2, yeah.
basically,
Yeah, that
what
looks
the
mighty
demand
high.
is.
I mean, the concept is if it's, you know, if it's a 200,000 square foot office building, then it's likely 10 stories, 20,000 per floor.
But it could be shorter.
It could be shorter, right, or taller. I guess the minimum it could be is 8 to 9 stories probably.
And the Civic Terrace, is that on the second level or?
Mhm. Yeah, the civic spaces, it used to be here, we've now shifted it
Right.
here. So it's now in the central park. Let me describe that 1 second, what I didn't point out. We're now keeping, this is now kind of the big shared open space in the middle. It used to be up here on the northern block. And now, so we've moved the music venue space to the second floor here, so it interacts with that open space below.
Right, because that was something I was thinking of, is the fact that if you have the outdoor space with any music, you want it available to the central area
Yep,
so that everybody can hear it or see it. It still is a little off, you know, probably even be better if it were almost like a stage onto the
well,
common area.
think about it this way, so the music venue itself is that red box on the
Right,
second
right.
floor. And so the terrace is here. So to the extent, you know, you've got open windows or you have, you know, that is still, that's still a vibrant, it's the main focal
Yeah.
point of the whole park is that second floor music space.
Yeah, and I would just add, we all should remember, these are very diagrammatic right now. We still have to design the buildings, and so we
But
can
I
take
think
comments like that into
That's a
account.
good place to put it
Yeah.
for the whole use of it and sound and everything.
Yep. This is a 3D drawing from the other direction, so similar to what it looked like before. The same height diagram from before. We've responded to some comments by reducing height further as you get closer to the school, to 7 stories max. That's for the maximum part of that wing, and in reality, it's much less than that in certain parts. It's around 2 stories. And then the same drawing from this side, you can see us terracing the height up from the school plaza away to the commons.
Oh,
So,
good.
Yeah, so that was responding to their comment there.
That's a good diagram like
Thanks.
that. I just thought I'd pat you on the head.
Shadow studies have been updated. These are all in the package, so you can look at these in detail, but they're better than they were before, obviously, because we have a shorter building in that location. But they show you get really good sunlight on the school every part of the year except for the dead of winter, which in the dead of winter, in the morning, if we build a 1-story building, you're gonna have shadows in the school, basically, so there wasn't much we could do there. Shared parking, parking hasn't really changed, really all that much at all. Just the locations have changed. We do have below-grade parking under this portion of the project now, because we don't have the above-grade parking here.
How many levels?
We don't know yet, 1 or 2, so we're working on that. At SESP, we'll have more info on that.
I think it's a good idea to have the two office buildings together.
Agreed, yeah. It's gonna make a big difference. Sections, the only sections that have changed, that I'll highlight, Haycock Road. In order to make the plan work within the new dimensions, we've taken advantage of, if you remember, you may have been in some of the conversations with Jim Snyder about the fact that Haycock was wider than it needed to be. There was about 4 or 5 feet of width. So we have now taken advantage of that and made those lanes, more appropriately designed for auto movements at 11 feet and made the medians correct. And so with doing that, the building has shifted about 5 feet towards Haycock. And so that crossing distance at Haycock will be a little shorter for pedestrians and bikes, which is really helpful. So that's, but the,
You're getting more of that street tree and sidewalk space.
right, that's right. And we increased, thank you, I forgot about that. We increased the tree pit and amenity zone along Haycock and 7. So we'll have, you can see from here, you could probably see better than I can because I can't read it from here. I think it's 8, is it 9'6"? Thank you. So instead of a typical 6-foot tree pit, those are now 9'6" wide, which will allow us to do really great vegetation along 7 and Haycock and then cut into the tree pit areas every so often in order to allow street furniture. And we're also intending to group the trees into 3 trees at a time into one huge pit. So you get the maximum stormwater management benefit, the maximum root zone. So we think the vegetation along 7 and Haycock will be much better and really attractive as a result, and it's important because it's such a gateway for the city.
Do we have any further news on the Haycock traffic light, both at the Street A and up at Mustang Alley?
So we're still showing a traffic light at Street A and the Hawk at Mustang Alley, and then committing will work at SESP. That traffic light might end up being a traffic light instead of a Hawk, we know that, so. We haven't changed anything on that from our last approval, though.
It's considering, you know, the mass exodus of kids, you don't know, you know, I've been trying to figure out their plot of getting across here.
Right. Yeah, so this will help too. So this is the other change we made to the street grid. This will help for students specifically. We had originally shown a cycle track as the main bicycle way into the school on the northern side
Right.
of Mustang Alley.
Right.
And then after a whole bunch of feedback, we've now changed that to a large shared use, 12-foot wide shared use path that's up on the curb and on the other side of the trees.
Ah,
And so that was for two reasons. Number one, to protect the kids. There was concern about cars going beyond the bollards and somehow, you know, getting into the cycle track. So this truly does protect them from that. And quite frankly, we're neutral to either of these. They're the same dimension. But the other reason why it seemed to make sense was the school traffic is very one-dimensional. Like, the only people biking to the school are kids biking, or teachers, biking in one direction in the morning and in the other direction in the afternoon. So a cycle track is generally where you have pretty even flow of traffic at the same time, and so you're protecting people from going in both directions. We'll still have median markers on going down this shared use path, telling people to stay on one side versus the other. But in general, you're gonna have a whole lot more traffic going towards the school at one point, and so this allows that flow to happen better. It also allows pedestrians to be in that environment, and since Virginia Tech isn't gonna develop till after, the sidewalk on that northern side is
Right.
not in existence yet when
Right.
we build, so you would have this great cycle track, but then you'd have no pedestrian connection on the northern side of the street. So now, with the shared use path, you have peds and bikes can share that space going to school, coming away from school in the interim, and then in the long term, not long term, a few years later, we'll get a true sidewalk in addition to that for pedestrians. So it seemed like it was a safer solution, and we heard a lot of feedback from that
yeah,
from the
but
community.
that's, again, though, why I still think you need a full traffic
We may.
signal up there rather than the Hawk.
Right, we may. We've heard that loudly and clearly.
Just safety for the kids, no matter, you know, it's just, that's what they do. And that's what, you know, the whole thing is you can't make a left-hand turn out of there now,
Right.
supposedly. And, you know, during, after school, you can't do that.
So we will, I mean, what we've committed to in our comments is to study that at SESP and come back to all of you in the next round, and we know that that's something that we've heard loudly and clearly people want. On this next drawing, the Street A, you can see it's kind of this cool shared street Woodruff design where you have kind of nice pavers, you've got these above-grade tree pits, so there's kind of protected pedestrian ways, there's shared space, there's auto-marked space. So we'll have a lot more detail at this at SESP about what we want that street to really look and feel like, but the idea is for Street A, between the hotel, the micro building, and the school, to have this kind of shared space and to use materials to tell people this is a place to slow down and be careful, there's kids in the area. So there'll be a lot more detail on this, you know, but that's where we're headed so far. The garage is no longer, another issue we'd heard a lot about was garage design up against Route 7 because of how visible it is. That is no longer an issue, obviously, so the garage is more on the side street or the alley street. We still will do placemaking on that garage, whether it's art or architecture on the buildings, and we'll share that all at SESP. We just haven't gotten very far along with that yet.
But it doesn't have to be school-related.
It doesn't, yeah, it wouldn't be school-related, and I mean, it could be school-related if they want, quite frankly, but it doesn't have to be, and it
No.
doesn't, it's not the main entrance to the city, like it was at one point on Route 7, so I think it can be a little bit more simple. None of this has changed. Tree canopy is similar to where we were before. The landscape drawings, you've seen, this is similar diagram to what we had before, with that kind of street angling through and these kind of art pieces in those main moments. The retail kiosk building is still there. This is that central common space and the southern block, and then the connection going over towards the grocery store. So once again, that's new, but the central block is not. And then this is just something to note. Oh, come on, stop. So the office building, you can see, kind of angles out over part of the commons. So we have outdoor cafe seating that's covered along the edge here, or outdoor seating. And so that allows us to maintain the commons dimension. So even though the acreage went from 10.4 to 9.4 acres, we were still able to keep the program by being creative in a few key places, and this was one of those places where we needed to be creative. So it'll be kind of a cool looking office building with this overhang, and you see that all over the city. And then we'll also provide this dual purpose of creating cover for people underneath.
Just make sure it has more visibility than Broadway.
You want a real visible office building, right?
Yeah, because that didn't work too well.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's, and Santana Row is a great example in California of, I mean, if
Yeah.
you do it right and intentionally, it'll be successful. So that hasn't changed. And that's it. These are the engineering drawings. So all very similar. I'd say the biggest open item is really the connection to the school. That's right. Sorry.
laughing that you're blowing through this.
Sorry, I should note, Karen and Antoinette spent hours and hours and hours between meetings and drawings doing all this work. And I'm giving them 0 credit, but yes, they did do a lot of work. They're just not as colorful drawings. But yeah, I'd say the biggest issue that I think at SCSP we need to really focus on in the short term is understanding the school drop-off and how that's gonna function with the schools. And you know, I think the good news is they're out ahead of us, so we can be a little bit responsive to them over the next few months before we put our SCSP package together.
You still working on the Route 7 situation with the turns?
Thank you for bringing that up too. So as.
Or should I have not?
I would say this, I mean, I think it was very clear in meetings with some of the supervisors from Fairfax County that a left turn out of the project was a complete deal killer in their view, and something that they would fight tooth and nail and do whatever they had to do to slow up the project. And so we did agree, we do have a left into the project here, as you can see. And then we've added a dedicated right turn out on Street A, because the unfortunate thing is that will create more left turns on Haycock going into the city. So we've accommodated that by creating a stacking lane here, allowing cars to get out and make that left turn. But you will not be able to make a left turn out of the project on Commons, unfortunately. You'll have it from Haycock, and you will have, of course, cars can go around the school loop road and get back into the city on Falls Church Drive. But yeah, we valiantly tried to get that approved.
Maybe give it a couple more years, you know? You keep trying
I will not comment on
with the
that.
logic of it all.
Yeah, I mean, it is.
God forbid we should consider logic.
So yeah, that is the agreement we've made. That is the agreement we've agreed to.
Right. So the reality is, so knowing that, I mean, you know, Paul knows, I've been talking to Paul about this in the last couple of weeks. I mean, so knowing that, so now we have only really one, I mean, you're showing a signal potentially at Street A, but as we just said before, we don't know if we're gonna get a signal there. I mean, it wouldn't meet
Well, no,
like.
there is-
Oh, no,
North-
that's signalized.
It's the Hawk at
This
Mustang
is
Alley.
definitely a traffic light.
A will be
This one
signalized.
is a Hawk today, but more likely is leaning towards being a traffic light. So more than likely, there will be other movements to go left turn out of the project here and here.
I guess, so the question is, you know, now that there's only one way, so for most people, I mean, technically, I guess, city residents could make a left and
Right.
go the other way, but the majority of city residents are gonna wanna go east. And so the only way now, that everyone's gotta kind of funnel through the main Haycock 7 intersection, which is already, you know, functions very poorly. It's at level service D.
Mhm.
The one traffic study that's been done, and I brought this up before, I feel like I'm, you know,
Yep.
sort of, you know, I bring it up every time just because I feel like someone has to bring it up. So, you know, it functions at level service D, it was projected to level service F.
Mhm.
We now don't have, you know, that other signal out onto 7, so everyone's gonna be funneling through. We only have, you know, and I know there's some talk about we're gonna look at the intersection, we're gonna look at the current lane configuration on Haycock, but there
Mhm.
aren't really any specifics
Right.
on that. Any new projections, I mean, the one traffic study that was done, you know, the plans have changed significantly since that was done. You know, there's been a lot more stuff that's even proposed than was looked at there. I still wonder, you know, how confident we are that it's really gonna work. I mean, you know, we all see what it's like with very little development along Haycock today. The queues in the evening, heading from Haycock to
Are long.
Shreve, are for people to go straight in that one lane.
Right.
Go all the way back to the light at the Metro, and now we're gonna have, I guess you know, I don't know, I mean, maybe, I don't know, I mean.
So I'll say this, I mean, we did look, so we've had Gore of Slade working on this with us, and they obviously worked with the city as well. And so they've studied this whole traffic issue in this general area. I mean, the good news is partially you're taking up the West End plan next, which will handle the Buyer property and the Federal Realty property. So there's some opportunity to create additional grid of streets on those properties, which will be helpful. And then, we studied a whole bunch of things, let me see if I have I think there is an overall, yeah, there we go, perfect. So we do know that there will be development on the WMATA property, most likely, and the Virginia Tech property. Oh, that's so annoying. And so there's a few traffic movements where things could be
Yeah.
helpful. And so today you do have a lot of cars that stack to go right here, and that does, create congestion for cars that want to go straight or left as well. And so one of the movements that we've been thinking about, number one, through our project, you'll get a continuous Main Street that goes all the way to here, so cars can avoid that intersection and go right, which is good in the morning. Second to that is, to the extent we are developing the WMATA site, we have an idea for it that would create a really nice, attractive workaround that gets cars to here in a way that makes sense. So today that connection is there, but nobody thinks to use it. But by celebrating it, by signing it correctly, by literally saying Route 7 North, go this way, we can take some of the pressure off the Haycock 7 intersection. Similarly to the south side, when you create the connection and the traffic light in the middle of the shopping center at Federal Realty
Yeah.
and 7 and get cars going left on Shreve to pull off of the highway and go left earlier, some of those, you're moving a few hundred cars in each of those movements, and so you'll get some relaxation at that intersection. The hard part with this is the vast majority of the traffic that you really experience here is because the through traffic on 7 is so strong
Right.
that the cycle time for that traffic light is such that
Right.
it doesn't allow as much movement time on the Haycock and Shreve
Right.
legs of it. And so, unfortunately, you don't control that. It's VDOT. There's little you can do to that intersection to change that issue. But what you can do, and what you are doing, is creating a really great walkable, pedestrian, and bike-oriented place throughout the whole west end of the city that creates the option for people to get out of their cars. And we're not going to get everyone out of their cars, but we get 5% more, 10% more. You start really having an impact on local traffic. And the other good news is most of the left turns out of our project, which will really be felt, will be coming at the end of the office day when office workers are leaving and then coming out of this to make a left, let's say, to go in this direction, which at that point, the Haycock is bad both times a day. I don't want to minimize it, but it's worse in the morning. So that helps a little bit with that. It's a little bit counter-cyclical. And then secondly is when we have a big event or, Saturday and Friday night evenings when you don't have the same rush hour traffic mixing with it. So that should function still. And in the ideal world, you would have a left turn out of the site.
Correct.
But we also want a project to move forward that creates economic
No, I
development for the
understand
school.
it
Does the
became-
flyover too, the I-66
Mhm.
flyover?
Yeah,
Can
that
you-
takes a few
if
hundred
you're
cars
going,
over.
On Haycock.
Yep.
Go into the WMATA site, can't you use the flyover?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, so that's another, when that connection gets made, which will happen shortly, and it's a pretty simple connection.
Right,
A
right.
lot of this will be signage plans, right? So if I'm going southbound on 7, we need to make sure there's signage that says Haycock northbound, turn here, and that will take you through the flyover and over to here versus having cars come off onto 7 and go that way. So I think we do have to change people's behaviors over time. That will be part of it.
Well, they can't make a left-hand turn there now.
Right, that's true. You're right.
I saw somebody do it today, which was interesting. They stacked right out in the middle of Route 7. Oh,
Yeah.
Right, but there's a lot fewer cars going there now. That's the thing.
Right.
Right, so that's the big.
I mean,
big
long-term,
change.
the other things that will be helpful, BRT long-term obviously could be helpful on 7. It will create some other issues, obviously, but it could also get some people moving on 7.
Yeah.
And the bus system, right now, because there's such limited development around the metro station, the buses here don't really serve a ton of people in that location. And so to the extent we create this great walkable urban place on this entire 35 acres, that could increase visibility and use of the buses and get people to and from Tyson's is really what you need, as much as possible. So there's some solutions we can do through TMD measures, but we're never gonna solve that intersection. I think that's
Right.
probably correct.
Well, I mean, I recognize that. I mean, in Northern Virginia, if we only, approved projects at, intersections that were at like level of service like, A and B, we wouldn't have anything. So
Right.
I understand that. The background levels are high
Right.
here. But I'm just concerned that, if it's so difficult to, kind of come in and out, I don't know, maybe it'll work itself out, I don't know. I mean, I'm not like a total traffic nut where I feel like we have to design everything to, so that no one has to wait ever. I mean, that's part of
Right.
life in a more urban place, and we all accept that, but I've always been just concerned about the sort of the lack of details about what is gonna be done. It sounds like, I don't know, so the signal that is at Street A,
Mm-hmm.
I guess technically, right, that's in the city now, right? That signal,
Mhm,
is that gonna
that's
be
in the
our
city.
signal? Are we gonna control that signal?
Yes, that'll be in the
We got that
city.
little sliver of Haycock now.
Well, would it,
That's
it might
ours.
even be up.
So we don't have to worry about VDOT
Mustang
space.
Alley, too.
We don't have
That
to worry
should
about
be
VDOT
to the
spacing, because
city.
that wouldn't meet spacing for signals, so that.
So those
Right.
both would be ours.
So
So
we know we can
VDOT's
have-
comment was, they have the right to comment on both of those.
Yeah.
But since they're in the city gets to approve them. So they'll coordinate, obviously, to make sure that the timing works for the
Right.
Haycock and 7 light as well. The good news is we did get the left in, quite frankly, which
Yeah.
if we didn't get that, that would have created
And
one
then-
huge issue, which is you'd have a bunch of cars doing U-turns here to get into the project, which would have been a nightmare. And you would have had a bunch of cars more stacking to make left turns onto Haycock. So at least we got that relief.
No,
But yeah,
that
I
is good.
apologize.
You know,
Better than nothing.
seriously though, I may have joked about give it a couple more years. If Ramada and with the grad center site, they may see indeed the need for
True,
doing elsewise.
right,
So it might come from their point of view
right.
rather than our point of view, which is always a better thing, you know, for Fairfax to agree to do something for themselves.
Right. So those are the changes to the plan. But once again, overall, same economics, same square footage, same general block diagrams. And we think it's actually much improved. We're really excited about the new plan. We were excited about the old one as well, but we think this is better, so.
Yeah, I think, there's been this represents a lot of changes. There's definitely some concerns. I think the traffic one is a real concern. I appreciate that Fairfax County is making this more challenging for us. I'm legitimately concerned about how that all works out. Let's hope it does in this case, because I don't want the project to come to a halt over
Right.
a one, left turn access. But as we talked about, Haycock can really back up, and sometimes it's the right turn, but it seems to me to be the through traffic Haycock to Shreve, and then the left-hand turn. The way that the median is structured is you can't even get there because it's backed up so
Right,
far.
right.
So even you have people who want to flow through and are missing light cycles because the intersection is just a mess.
Right.
So I hope that we can address that a little bit, but I don't want the project to come to a halt as a result of that issue. I think that you have identified correctly that this access to the school and this turnaround is a really important thing. As far as I see it, I think it is really important. I think that the school parking and all those issues surrounding it has been. I'm not as supportive of what they're trying to do on the school site around this parking, and I think it has caused some issues for me personally, but that's a different application than what we're seeing
Right.
here. But I do think it's really important to keep the flow, and I'm not at all personally worried about the parking as it comes before the planning commission on that. The phase 2 issues, I'm curious, because I couldn't see from the renderings, what the Haycock facing look is after phase 1 on this parking garage. Is there some sort of facade? Are we looking at the parking garage
Oh,
at that
yeah.
point? So I'm curious to see what your thoughts are. Are we just looking at a parking garage in the near term? And then I am concerned while I think the office buildings together do make more economic sense, one of the advantages of the old plan was that the construction was away from the school. So now you're fully, you had a school that was completely done, you had phase 1 that on your project that was done, and then when we went back to that in a few years, that construction was far away from the school. Now you're right on it, you're right on that parking space. It's a more confusing situation. I know that's solvable.
Staging for that, yeah.
I do think that the micro units closer to the metro makes a lot more sense. I really like that
Yeah.
move and the hotel. I think there is. I appreciate that you're trying to maximize the retail, and that's why we have the terraces on the second level.
Right.
What material is that? I mean, it looks green on the picture, but is that intended to be like artificial turf, or is that?
Oh, no. No, it'll be a mix of hardscape and planters and stormwater management and some green space. It'll be a mixture of everything.
Okay. And the fact that the condos for the city, does that cause any problems? I think it before, in terms of like the ground lease, it wasn't gonna be an issue. It was supposed to be like basically where the senior housing was, right? And now the condos have just moved down into this Block A, right?
It's the exact reverse of what it was before. So the Block D, if you remember, it's literally, if you mirror this, that's what it looked like. Block D was this longer linear thing here. The condo building was here. And then the phase 2 stuff was here. So it's similar, it's just the exact reverse on Route 7 versus the Mustang Alley property.
And that doesn't cause us any issue in terms of lot lines and the ground lease versus anything else? There's no problem with that being in the interior of the site? I think we solved that before. And this bridge, it looks like on the rendering, it's a 2-story bridge.
Very conceptual. We have not really thought about that bridge yet, so let us come back to you at SESP. The idea is that it's a multiple level bridge, so you can connect from multiple levels of parking right into the residential building, but we have not priced that. We have not gotten into any detail other than that there will be a bridge connection.
Is there any way to connect from the underground garage underneath the commons, or do you have to come up?
No, you have to come out. They're two separate garages. Yeah. Yeah, the commons is open to the earth below for stormwater management, tree pits, all that.
And so during we talked about this again back when we had the other plan where phase 2 was off to the side, and there was a lot of discussion like what was going to become of that land, and the discussion was like, well, we don't want to make it a dog park because then net people get attached to that. Now that these are two separate spaces, do we have a different idea, or do you have some idea of what this looks like in the intervening years?
So in the interim years, half of this property will be used by the schools for parking, that part. Half of it would either be used for parking or staging, or we don't know. We'll study what we want to do with that half of the property before SESP and give you some ideas. But the thought is staging and or parking. This one as well will probably be parking in the interim after phase 1 opens. So there's a little bit of additional teaser surface parking. And that's what we did, and then we'll start building phase 2.
What will the parking structure look like there? I mean, so.
Just surface. Oh, what will the garage? Yeah, that was.
Yeah, the garage.
That's what. That was what was asked initially. We haven't given a ton of thought about that yet, but I think there's some great examples from Pike and Rose where we had, for example, the REI building was built initially, and the next office building that will go up directly next to us is a few years behind, and so they did a really cool mural on it. I mean, there are ways for us to make it attractive.
So you're just gonna do like in the short term some kind of mural or something?
Yeah, we haven't thought about it yet.
Yeah, I don't know. I was thinking about it again when you talk about it being like maybe a parking lot or something like that. But
I did make a note of that one, so when we come in for SESP, we'll have thought through that.
okay.
But the staging areas for both phase 2 are gonna be difficult.
Yeah, it'll be an urban condition. It'll be like, building in a city where it's a little bit tight, and we'll figure it out.
So, Alley 1, you have this loading area, it's like trash loading area. Is this movement looks unusual to me, is the idea that you come past the loading area and then back into it?
Yeah.
And this alley is, I don't know how wide it is it?
It's about 40 feet.
I mean, the idea, this grocery store is gonna have a lot of
Yeah, so we've done truck
loading and unloading
turn.
here.
We've done truck turn movements on the street already. It's actually a preferred movement for the grocer. They like this kind of back in angled versus a back in 90 degree. It's just easier for the trucks. They have better visibility, and it's easier for them to get out. And then we've set it pretty deep into the building so the trucks can be well back of the alley. So you have that movement, the moment in time where they're moving in and out. But other than that, they're pretty far back there, so it doesn't feel like they're right up on the alley.
Are you using the warp experience where it seems like everything's kind of jumbled and you have these narrow areas, but everybody uses it?
Similar, but it's wider than a lot of those. The wharf ones are 25 feet. This is 40, so it is a wider, more I wouldn't say suburban, but less urban condition than that.
So do you see the trucks then turning on the Haycock, coming down A, and driving down this alley?
to 8 degree slope. I mean,
Right,
it's
exactly.
a-
Right,
And then backing in and then coming out on something
and making a right turn.
and
Yep.
making a right turn. So that's a very defined way to go.
Yeah, we'll have a traffic for all of our retail tenants, especially for the grocer. We'll have traffic management plans for all the loading.
Yeah,
and we'll
and
have
the reason I
times.
question is, it's like if they're coming that direction on Haycock, because I'm assuming they're not going to come in from 7 and try to do a left turn in there, or I guess they might. Is that what we're going to plan to do?
No, the trucks will make a right onto Haycock coming northbound, or make a left onto Haycock coming southbound, and then make a left onto Street A, and then
Okay.
go into the alley. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just, because, I mean, Haycock, as it goes towards Fairfax County, gets kind of more narrow and dicey when it approaches Great Falls, so I don't think we really want trucks coming from that direction. but-
Right. Yeah. No. This functions well for the trucks.
Okay.
And it is what it is. Like, if you want a grocery store, you have to have loading, and so it's got to be on
Right.
some of the streets, and that's the right path to do it.
Yeah, so look, if you've done the truck movements, this concerns me in terms of the motion, the movement. You are coming up a 7 to 8 degree grade. I'm not expecting you to change that, of course. But this is a tight turn, and I actually currently live above the Harris Teeter here, and the movements are happening at the time that school is going to be. I mean, it's well covered on the building I live in, but those deliveries are often happening right at the time when schools are happening, and so this truck movement's going to be occurring. I don't see these trucks moving fast. This is not a easy flow. By going up a 7 and 8 degree grade, then you got to make this tough left turn, and then this back out process at the same time. I think I'm hoping there's some turnaround here in the traffic, in the parking lot that's going to be
Right.
future considered. So I think movement at that time of day, because of the uniqueness of the street and the fact that those trucks have to go in there, it's going to be a really tough morning.
Yeah,
And-
it's better than so in our old plan, the trucks were coming in off Street A. It was the same exact movement, but they were backing in on Street A. So the nice thing now is those trucks come in on Street A, but we get them right away into the Winnerf where they're doing their movement in
that's
that
fair.
protected space. And so it's actually improved from what it was before.
Fair enough.
And the reason for that is in the old plan, Block A was kind of it was narrower and longer. So you came in on Street A, and then the trucks really had to back in because there was no other way to deal with loading.
So this is what concerns me. Ouch. This little bump out.
Right. That we'll
You're
study.
You're coming up a really steep grade.
Yeah.
This is steep, and then this makes this really
Yep.
difficult, and I would be worried about that.
Okay.
In terms of that motion at that time of day when I don't want them to stop at this point because they're going to be in
Right.
low gear and making a lot of noise.
Okay, so we got to study. Yeah, I agree. We have to study that
It almost
intersection.
seems like, would it be better, and I'm not saying you have to do this, and you've been looking at it, would it be better if they actually turned into the alley and came up and you angled it the other way and they backed in, and then they came out on the grade?
We tried, but because of
Okay.
the grade issue, this is actually the better
Okay.
way for the trucks to move.
Okay, just wondering.
We looked at that as well.
Yeah, because I was thinking about that too, that might work better.
I know this is not for this approval here. I'm curious, do you plan on having retail on like 4 sides of this, or this is just a walkway and you're looking at, a wall?
Let me go back to, yeah, so the concept there, I mean, obviously this will depend on who the tenant is in that space, but let me get back to the retail plan. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so we have a retail tenant here as well as a retail tenant here, and then retail tenant here, condo entry here. So depending on who that tenant is, the idea is you'd have glass it will have glass going along the edges here, so this will feel like this really cool space with kind of twinkle lights going across. In Santana Row, those spaces are used for outdoor cafe seating that are kind of covered by the building above. But yeah, that will be made to feel like a cool space as you walk through it.
Is it 1 story?
Yeah. Well, it's 20 feet, so it's retail height.
So when you, in that pedestrian walkway, will there be entrances internally to those 2 retail sites as well?
Yeah, I mean, it'll depend on what the retail tenants want to do, but
Okay.
ideally you'd have retail tenants that want to open up into that space.
Yeah, I mean, because it's a nice, between the grocery store and those 3, it could be like a double right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I said before, overall it's an improvement. I'm really happy with the parking garage up into the
Great.
far right of this, this property versus right on, as you said, the entrance into the city. I will be curious to say what does this office building look like and what is the entrance and how
Yeah.
we sign that and how that becomes important, but that's not at this level. Does anybody else have any other questions? I sort of asked the ones I wanted to.
We're commenting on the VCs,
Feel free to comment, yeah.
in the electric vehicle charging station.
Uh-huh.
You've got, owner agrees to a minimum of 10. Do you have any thoughts?
Oh, we increased that
Because
in
the
the,
parking lots are kind of spread all over, right? So that, would that just be 10?
You're gonna need more.
we increased that at the, didn't we, as part of our VCs?
Because this looked to
Thought we
me
had
like
increased it,
what
but
the
I
city
don't
got
remember
for
from what
Founder's
to
Row.
what.
We heard your comment, and I think we increased it to, I need to check, but I thought it was to 15 stations and 10% of the spaces being accessible, or
conduit.
having conduit.
A percentage is definitely a good way.
Yeah, I think that's right. We also checked with some of the providers to make sure that we'd have flexibility to provide, oh, so we also agreed to provide a fast charge station. So you may be looking at an older version of that comment.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, so maybe,
Definitely increased it, I don't remember.
we are gonna be submitting a red line of the VCs based upon our meeting with staff last week in the next 48 hours or so. And so that new version will get out shortly, and then we can
Yeah,
take
they set
additional
an end
comments.
date on it, so I'm not sure. All right. we'll look
That's,
forward
yeah,
to
that's
that.
changed. I can pull, well, whatever.
Other questions? All right. All right, I'm good.
That's it? Yeah, thank you, everybody.
I'm grateful for all the labeling on everything, because the little thing that we saw before was like, what's going on?
I'm glad. The benefit of submitting 3 times is you get better each time.
Yeah.
I do want to make sure that the planning commission has the information it needs, so this is scheduled for a recommendation from the planning commission at the group's next meeting on June 17. Is there anything members need to see in the packet or questions they want to ask now?
No, I mean, for me, no. We've already approved this.
Right.
It's changed. I appreciate the education about how it's changed, but in terms of the issues that we'll have at site plan, that's not at this point. And as Mr. Stoddard said, this is a recommendation in this case as opposed to a formal approval like we
Right.
normally do. So I don't need any more information. I was comfortable with it before, and I'm now comfortable with the changes. But if you need other additional information, let him know, and we'll get it.
I won't be here on the 17th, but hopefully you guys will be.
You can vote now.
We were unanimous last time, you know.
Just kidding.
There is electronic voting, if you're available remotely.
I'll be on vacation, and it'll be my 19th wedding anniversary, so.
Congratulations.
If you want me to make it to any future meetings beyond that, try not to dial in on my anniversary.
I don't really have any more questions. I think I think it's too bad that we can't have the shared garage anymore, and we don't really know what the pickup drop-off is gonna be, but I don't think there's anything we can do about that now. So,
But it is important in the future.
well, it's very important how that's gonna happen, because currently, it doesn't look like it's gonna be that easy.
I should say the intent is still that there still would be available overflow parking spaces for the school within the garages. It's just that it won't be in that location.
All right, well, thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you on the 17th.
Mr. Chair, can we make a, following up on your concern on, keeping the drop-off in the parking lot?
Right.
Is that something we could make a recommendation on, or at least opine in that regard? 'Cause I would certainly support
That'd be a
Yeah,
good thing.
That's site plan 2, right?
Yeah, right, I think we're gonna get some information at the June 17th meeting, or was July
But
meeting.
could we encourage, like, in the motion, should they, we encourage
tip our hand.
continuing?
Sightline 2 is coming back to us.
Yes.
Right, it will.
Next time.
But we can still encourage it, because
Thank
a
you.
lot of times,
Thank you.
if we're not emphatic about things we want, it comes back and they say it didn't work out. I think it's good to have it in a formal motion that we're really encouraging them to do this.
I'm never gonna be comfortable with the traffic, but I just have to be a little uncomfortable.
So, just,
Cross my fingers and.
There is, I mean, there is that tabulation there that shows the difference in
Yeah,
estimated.
no, that help. I mean, at the end of the day,
You gotta give
And the
your
amended
Fairfax County friends a
TIA,
go vote.
staff is expecting to get the amended
we
TIA.
off the record now, we off the record, all the mics up before you,
no, we're still on the record.
I don't say anything.
S-
Little heated, but-
So, just a heads up, though Paul is leaving us for a few weeks, and we will be very sad. June 17th and July 1st are really action-packed here. We had substantive conversations about how to reduce it because of the various actions. I don't see an ability to reduce any of these items. There's a lot of sort of moving pieces that have to sort of stay together on this. But let's be prepared to get it done on those 2 dates. Let's not dawdle. Keep the comments to a minimum. If we heard it already, let's move forward. These re-subdivisions and the land stuff, I mean, I want to introduce it. We talked about it at work session. Let's just move, because there's a lot to cover.
Nothing is gonna be
I
different.
think we can all agree that, I mean, this was a pretty easy work session technically. So-
Yeah, but there's a lot of items that you'll see on the next 2 meetings, and I'm aware of it. I just want a heads up.
Okay.
So, Paul, we talked about, we're doing the demographics and housing on the comprehensive plan. What was, it was the,
Natural resources is deferred.
natural resources deferred. I wanted people to like, forgot which one it was. Natural resources got pushed.
More detail that needs to be added.
So we're down to 2 items on the comp plan as opposed to the 3.
And there are surveys open. I can forward the links to the planning commissioners so that you all make sure to tell friends, relations, neighbors to get online, take the surveys.
Russian bot farms.
Wait a minute, I thought you only talked about autonomous cars.
Well, the surveys are related to demographics and housing. There is, as always, in other comments or other areas of considerations. Questions?
All right, no other comments. We are adjourned.